Hey everybody, Keith Hilson with the Schmidt Music Trombone Shop, back with another daily practice tip for you. And today I have the second part of my series on multiple tonguing, double tonguing, triple tonguing. So if you didn't get a chance to check out the last video, I talked about in there an introduction to multiple tonguing, using these different syllables, taka, daga, etc., to activate not only the front of the tongue in the articulation, but the middle of the tongue as well. And talked about a few basics, how we can start to develop that. Now, today I want to talk about a few more advanced ideas here. Once we've got our multiple tonguing starting to happen, how do we develop it? How do we control it? How do we use it more effectively in musical situations? So when I am working on my own multiple tonguing, or if I'm working with students on multiple tonguing, there are a number of different issues that sometimes arise in their multiple tonguing. So the first thing that we run into a lot of times is maybe not using the right syllables for what we need to do. In a previous video, I talked about articulation and how I approach articulation as far as syllables go, using different shapes of the tongue, to, do, no, tho, etc., to help to shape the front of the note, to give us more nuance in what we're trying to create with these note shapes. And the same thing can very much be used with multiple tonguing as well. Very often, for example, in the Arbenz book, they use the term tuku, 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 tu, tuku, tuku, tu. Now, I'm actually not a fan of the oo part at all, because I feel like that does weird stuff to our embouchure, and it puts the tongue in kind of a weird place. If you say ooh, you kind of rolls a little bit. I'm more fan of o or ah. Toko toko to, taka taka ta, tiki tiki ti. And of course, we can change that back end of the syllable, o, ah, e, to help to match the different registers we're playing in. So if we're in the lower register, using a more open lower o sound versus middle register ah, or upper register e, to help support those differences in airflow that we need. But beyond that, we can have that front, the ta and the ka part there, but those are, of course, very harsh consonant sound, ta, ka, in there. We can shape what we want these multiple tonguing, these articulations to sound like by using different syllables. So, for example, a lot of times I might use taka, but I might use a little bit softer, like daga, 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 da, daga, daga, da, or I can start to make it softer, so almost treating it more like a legato, daga daga da, daga daga da, daga daga da. So I'm using less of my tongue with that really soft da and ga. And if we do it right, we can get some real definition and differentiation between those articulations. So right off the bat, that's something we can work on controlling, learning how to use, and helping us to shape particular musical phrases that we need to have. We don't always need to be playing super harsh taka taka ta. And that kind of leads to my second point here, which is using the right kind of syllable to match not only the style of the music, but the dynamic of the music, what we're doing with our airflow. Very often what I have is when folks are trying to play articulation, multiple articulations that are really, really fast, and maybe they're not all that loud, they're still trying to use a really, really harsh articulation, taka taka ta. Now, sometimes at softer dynamics, that can be okay. We can get more clarity. I'm trying to think, trying to get really sharp and crisp and precise there. Now, the problem is when we start to play at higher dynamics, it doesn't necessarily work the same way. We have to, at these higher airspeeds where we have more air volume and more speed with the air, a lighter articulation where we're trying to get that pinpoint ta and ka sound tends to get blown out of proportion. If I try to do that same articulation at high dynamics, it sounds harsh, it's not even, and I'm actually having to basically clamp down on my embouchure. Everything's kind of focusing inward to try to do this. So just like when we're using articulations at, our single articulations at different dynamics, we can do this with multiple articulations. And it's a big point of contention. I've certainly heard it said that for some orchestral players, they never use an articulation harder than a do. Well, why is that? I think the overall idea is that because at those higher dynamics, you can't support that real tight kind of sound. So instead, if we open things up more and think more da 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 da, versus trying to get that real tight ta, I'm able to stay more open, and I think the result is an articulation that speaks much cleaner. I think it still has plenty of clarity to it, but it's more in control, it's more even, it has more projection to it as well. Now, vice versa, when we are playing at softer dynamics, we can change the articulation, get more of that precise, etc. with that. So playing around with those differences in that airspeed, higher volume, maybe pull back a little bit on the syllable. Don't try to articulate so hard, keep things more open. At softer dynamics, maybe we can be a little bit more precise with it, but always having that air support behind it as well. And as a quick side note there, for a lot of what we need to do with multiple tonguing, anytime we're playing any type of technical passage like that, there's a really good chance that maybe we don't have to be playing it as loudly, as heavily as we think that we need to here. And that actually kind of leads to my third point here as far as overall accuracy. So when I have somebody who is working, or frankly, when I'm working on my multiple tonguing, this is something that it's been a long time coming for me, and I feel like I always have a long ways to go in developing my control multiple tonguing, and especially in more technical situations. When I am working on this, one thing that I find is that it may not be the articulation itself, the multiple tonguing, that's maybe getting in the way of the clarity, making me feel like I'm accomplishing what I'm trying to say musically, but oftentimes it's maybe the technique that's actually getting in the way here. So very often when we get into a lot of technical exercise, I had somebody email asking me about the Arbenz Carnival of Venice variations, and some of these variations here, where of course we're getting into very technical portions here. Exercises like that, as I'm going through and working on them, again, very often I find it's not the articulation that's the problem. It's this stuff. It's the technique. Why does that all work together? Well, any note that we play, one of the concepts that I always am thinking about, and I talk about with my students, is that to get any note to play on our instrument, we have to have our ears, our embouchure, and the slide all have to be in agreement. We have to be thinking the same thing. If our ears are hearing the right thing, and our embouchure is in the right place to play it, they're set to play the right frequency, but the slide is not in the right place to allow the instrument to play that frequency, you're going to get an argument. What you're going to get a split note. You're going to get a note that's not centering properly. It doesn't have the cleanliness we're looking for. When we're dealing with something technical like this, all of that is just magnified and expanded. And so as we're going through working on these kind of exercises, I try to, of course, spend a lot of time to make sure and work my speed up to make sure that this is not getting in the way of everything else. And of course, even here, I'm trying to play it lightly. There's no reason I have to be da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't have to be like that. That's not, frankly, all that musical, at least in my opinion. We can have a lot of these contrasts in dynamic and energy and style and everything, but within reason. And of course, there's so many other directions we can go with this as well. But again, these have been a few concepts that have been really, really helpful to me. And more importantly, the biggest thing I always think about with multiple tonguing is, just like any articulation, air. The articulation is subservient to the air. Everything we're doing with it needs to have that air support first, and then we add the articulation in after that. So I hope a few of these ideas were helpful here. If you have any thoughts, if you have any experiences with this, you said, I found this to be really helpful with technical, multiple tonguing or, passages, please feel free to share those with everybody watching. Feel free to leave those in the comments here. If you have any particular questions about this or frankly anything else trombone brass related, you can always reach out to us at tromboneshop@schmidtmusic.com. You can of course find us on Facebook, on Instagram. If you get a chance, make sure to check out our other videos on Facebook and on our YouTube channel as well. So I really appreciate you watching. So happy practicing, and above all else, please keep making music.